if nothing else, 2021 had to be the culmination for Vikings fans of that feeling of finally an organizational cleanse. Y'all have been chomping at the bit as Vikings fans, I know, for Rick Spielman to go, but especially for head coach Mike Zimmer to go. Like, you could just see it. You could sense it. You could feel it. You knew it. Like, it was time to move the hell on. And thankfully for Vikings fans and the Vikings organization, once 2021 ended, that's what they did. And good for them. Like, no reason to continue to go down that path. You needed some fresh blood. You needed a change of perspective. And I really look at their choices for general manager and head coach as interesting, because you look at the general manager spot first, and they hired from the Browns organization Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. And here's my issue with this. Like, some folks are going to talk about, well, he's got the math background or whatever the hell it is, or he's one of these stats and math nerds and blah, blah, blah. I'm less concerned about that, because there's more than one way to skin the cat when it comes to an NFL general manager. What I'm more concerned about is the fact that you would go out there and hire somebody from a front office with little experience in his job, mind you, that was part of an organization that didn't even make the playoffs last year. The Browns haven't won a damn thing. They won one playoff game the season before. Why are you bending over backwards to hire this guy? What did Adofo-Mensah do that was so impressive to overcome the lack of experience and the lack of winning pedigree and credentials behind him? That's fascinating to me. And it makes it one of the more intriguing hires by any team this offseason, because either the Vikings are going to look, groundbreaking in this, or they're going to look like groundbreaking morons. Now, in terms of the head coaching hire, that to me was a bit more conventional, especially in terms of the recent NFL, and that is hiring away Kevin O'Connell from the Los Angeles Rams. This, to me, was not surprising in the sense that, especially once the Harbaugh stuff didn't happen, O'Connell was a guy that comes from the McVay coaching tree, and basically if McVay's ever farted, pissed, or shit on you, or in your general direction on his coaching staff, like, other NFL teams want those guys. But O'Connell has been somebody even back when he was assistant in Washington. I've been pointing to, like, he's going to be a future NFL head coach. Former quarterback, comes from that Shanahan-McVay coaching tree. He's going to get a job at some point. And when you think about bringing him in, the identity of this Vikings team is on the offensive side of the ball. You bring in a guy that could work with Kirk Cousins in that offense. That makes sense. So I get the Kevin O'Connell hire 100%. The GM hire, not so sure about. When you look at the team, what happened in this offseason, you're hoping you get Danielle Hunter to return back to health. They sized Zadarius Smith after he was released by the Green Bay Packers, so you add some edge rushers, which is notable because the Vikings are switching to a 3-4 defense, which, if you're going to bring in a new regime, like, why use the same defensive philosophy that failed the previous years under Mike Zimmer? Like, that's why Mike Zimmer needed to go. You could talk about, well, the Vikings are kind of stuck in mid-card hell, as I might call it, and that mediocre cycle of not bad enough to truly get to the top and get difference makers in the draft, but not good enough to be contenders. They certainly were in that mix, but what's the point of a defensive guy as your head coach if his defenses stink? And they had for the past couple of seasons. They'd aged out, got bad, and didn't replenish the talent that they needed to replenish. So sometimes switching gimmicks, or in this case switching schemes, can help improve your defense. And they also reinforced the defense some in the draft by drafting Louis Cine, the safety, and then Andrew Booth at corner out of Clemson. Ed Ingram should help beef up that interior offensive line, which was a bit of a weakness for the Vikings at times last year. When I look at this Vikings team, though, I still would come back to the GM again and say, what was Mensah doing? Like, why are you trading in the division like that? Like, why would you allow the Lions to get somebody like Jameson Williams? And even when you look at the value that you got in return, you allowed the Lions to move up 20 spots and you didn't get at least a first-round pick in next year's draft? That's dumb. Like, let's not spin that. That's dumb. That's a bad job of managing the draft game. However, he may redeem himself with the hiring of Kevin O'Connell, because the more notable switch, I talked about the switch to the 3-4 defense, the more notable switch is to that offense first mindset. And this team has kind of already been gravitating that way the past couple of years just because of the superior talent they have on the offensive side of the ball compared to their defense. But now you got the head coach that can help bring that out. And that's where most of the strength of this team lies, is on that offense. And you look at the passing game. You've got Justin Jefferson there. Hopefully Irv Smith can stay healthy for them. Adam Thielen's at the tail end of his career, but he's still solid. Then you got KJ Osborne's a pretty good number 3 wide receiver. And we could talk all we want about Kirk Cousins being captain mid and all of this. But there are more than half of teams of the league that wish they had a quarterback that could put up the numbers that Kirk Cousins does. Like, he's not elite. He never will be. He's barely borderline franchise, but he's not a scrub. And let's be very, very clear, the past couple of years, he's been far from the biggest problem with the Minnesota Vikings. I know when you look at the quarterback, it is very easy to see the shortcomings or the faults sometimes, and he certainly has them. But he could only help overcome but so much for the deficiencies of the rest of this roster, the rest of the team, and last year the deficiencies in the coaching staff and the leadership. So even at one point, what was it after the one game when Kirk Cousins and Mike Zimmer kind of got into it a little bit? Somebody won that battle, and it sure as hell wasn't Mike Zimmer. This is a team that can move the ball through the air, and then they've got a running game with Dalvin Cook that is nothing to sneeze at. And they've got some depth in that backfield. Like, offensively, this is a pretty good unit. And then defensively, this was a team that was able to get after the quarterback quite proficiently last year. They were second in the league with 51 sacks. And with that switch to the 3-4 defense, I think they might be able to get similar amounts of pressure, especially bringing in Zadarius Smith. You've got Danielle Hunter hopefully going to play. This could be a defense that does get better. My concerns, the interior of that offensive line. If that unit is better, then you're looking at a top 5 to 7 offense in the league probably. The bigger concern to me is on the defensive side of the ball, because that's where the shortcomings have been the past couple of years. How's this defense going to handle the switch to the 3-4? How's this defense going to hold up? You brought in some young talent in the secondary like Cine and Booth, but there were still other problems on this defensive unit at all 3 levels. Like, how well are you going to be able to play the run? Who are the run stuffers on this unit? How well is your secondary going to hold up? The pass rush is great to have. Believe me, it is. But what if you can't get to the quarterback? Are you going to leave opportunities to get shredded in the passing game? Time will tell. I look at this team's schedule, and right off the bat, they've got a couple of tough ones to start. You got to host Green Bay in week 1, and then you travel to Philadelphia in week 2. Like, if you're the Vikings, you want to win one of those first 2 games. You probably prefer that it be against the Packers, as you really want to start off week 1 with a win. You want to get yourself a bit of a head up on Green Bay early to start the year, as unlikely as that might be. Strange things happen in week 1 all the time. Then I look, there's a stretch there in the middle of the season between weeks 8 to 12. They host Arizona, go to Washington, to Buffalo, host Dallas, host New England. So you look at that stretch and you say, there's 4 playoff teams last year, and then Washington sandwiched in there, and that's a road game. That's a stretch that if the Vikings want to contend for a playoff spot this year, let alone like contend for the NFC North, they want to contend, like that's a part of the schedule that they've got to do well in. And then to close out the year, they go to Green Bay in week 17, and they go to Chicago in week 18. Like, there's one embarrassing thing about Mike Zimmer. You want to know why Mike Zimmer should have been fired? He couldn't beat Matt Nagy. He couldn't beat the numbskull. That's how much Mike Zimmer absolutely sucked. Period. How the hell do you get dominated by Matt Nagy? So there's a chance late in the year when the Vikings may need those last 2 games to get into playoff position. Those are 2 games that they got to be able to go on the road and take care of business, which could be easier said than done. I'm a mixed bag on this Vikings team right now. I like the switch of the 3-4 defense for them. I still have questions about their defense, as I've talked about, but that offense is really good. And they've brought in an offensive-minded guy. They've got some new leadership there. I do think the Vikings right now are the second-best team in this division. I think they'll win at least 9 games. They might slide into the playoffs. They could backslide a little bit. I don't see it, though, unless there's, like, serious injuries to Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, but those are things that I can't really foretell right now. What I can say is that with that offensive unit, they should be in the mix for a playoff spot. And if they're not, then there's much bigger problems in Minnesota.